The Boy Who Became King. In the winter of 1547, the city of London was buzzing with excitement. Inside the palace, a young boy named Edward woke up to a very special morning. He was only 9 years old, and he still loved playing with his wooden horses. But today, his life was going to change forever. Today was the day he would be crowned king. Being a king meant wearing very grand clothes. Edward stood very still as his helpers brought out a magnificent robe made of crimson velvet and lined with soft white fur. The robe was so long and so heavy that it felt like wearing a giant, warm blanket. Edward took a deep breath. He had to stand tall, even if the velvet felt like it weighed as much as a suit of armor. Outside, the streets were filled with people waving flags and shouting his name. Edward climbed into a golden carriage. As the horses trotted toward Westminster Abbey, he looked out the window. He saw children perched on their father's shoulders just to get a glimpse of him. He gave a small wave, and the crowd cheered even louder. When the carriage stopped, Edward stood before the great stone doors of Westminster Abbey. Waiting for him was a kind man with a long gray beard named Barnaby. Barnaby was the archbishop, and he knew exactly what to do. He smiled at Edward and held out a hand to lead him inside the cool, quiet church. Inside, the abbey felt as big as a mountain. Barnaby led Edward to a high platform so everyone could see him. Barnaby turned to the people and asked in a loud, clear voice, "Will you serve your new king?" The answer came back like a wave of thunder. "God save the king!" Edward felt the sound shake the very floor beneath his boots. Then came the most solemn part of the day. Edward knelt down on a soft cushion. Barnaby took a small, golden bowl filled with special oil. He gently touched the oil to Edward's hands, his chest, and his forehead. It was a sign that Edward was being set apart to look after all the people in his kingdom. Now it was time for the most important moment. Barnaby picked up a heavy gold crown. It was covered in sparkling diamonds, red rubies, and green emeralds. Slowly and carefully, Barnaby lowered the crown onto Edward's head. It was a bit wobbly and very heavy, but Edward kept his neck very straight so it wouldn't slip. Edward was led to a very old wooden chair called St. Edward's chair. It was carved with ancient patterns and felt very sturdy. He sat down and was handed two things to hold, a golden ball with a cross on top called an orb, and a long golden rod called a scepter. He felt very small in the big chair, but he felt like a king. The ceremony was over, and the music began to play. Trumpets blared, and the choir sang beautiful songs that echoed off the high ceiling. Edward walked back down the long aisle of the abbey. Barnaby walked beside him, making sure the young king felt steady as they moved past the smiling faces of the lords and ladies. Late that night, Edward was back in his room. The heavy crown was resting on a table, and his crimson robe was tucked away. He picked up his wooden horse and looked out at the moon over London. He knew he had a lot to learn about being a king, but he wasn't afraid. He was ready to grow up alongside his kingdom.